I'm a truck driver, and I work for a company that finds me deliveries. To do, they schedule everything with all the other companies, and I just pick up and deliver, whatever. And whenever I'm told, it can get pretty stressful. Sometimes when I get booked for a lot of shorter deliveries back to back, but this one was a long cross-country delivery. So I was looking forward to just driving and not worrying too much about anything else. I was heading from the West Coast to the East Coast and was on my second full day. I was planning on driving from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. I'm not too picky on where I sleep. I usually just pull off at the nearest truck stop, so there was no need to plan exactly what town to pull off in around 900 p.m. I made my last stop for the night at a small gas station. I filled up the tank and got some off-brand caffeinated drink to try out, then got back in the truck and pulled out. Now I just had 3 more hours to go, and with the roads being a lot more clear, it shouldn't be too bad. I turned on some country music and just stared at the road, mostly spacing out or thinking about whatever came to mind. Then, I want to say, it was around 11 p.m. A sudden scratchy noise startled me out of my head. It was the radio. I had it on the same channel as other truckers, which we often use the chat while driving, though usually that's only during the day. I can't remember the last time someone was talking through it. At night, I looked in my mirrors and didn't see any nearby trucks, and there was nobody in front of me either before I could grab the walkie. Though the scratchy noise came back, and there was a quick instant where I could hear a voice. It was only a split second, but it sounded like they were either saying hello or help before it cut out again. There's obviously a big difference between the two, so I quickly grabbed the radio and asked if someone needed something. I waited for a while holding the radio and listening to the soft buzzing noise coming from it. There was something unnerving building up inside of me as I continued to wait and still got no response, but then my headlights lit up something on the road ahead. I slowed down, and once I saw that it wasn't moving, I pulled off to the side and stopped. There was a semi-truck parked right in the middle of this one-lane highway. I knew this had to be the one I heard through the radio, as there were no other trucks out here. The way it was dangerously parked on the road was concerning, and I knew something was wrong. I thought maybe they had a sudden heart attack or a stroke or something, I don't know. It sounds kind of crazy, but that would have explained the sudden stop and call for help. I stepped out and started walking up to it. The whole road was quiet, with only the sound of the grass rustling in the wind from the endless fields on either side of the highway. I called out a few times as I hurried up, but never got a response. Then I got up to the door, which was open, and looked inside. My heart sank, and I could feel the fear creeping up inside of me. No one was in the truck. There was a jacket slung over the passenger seat, and a half-empty coffee cup in one of the cup holders, and the radio was dangling from the ceiling, but no signs of anything having happened. It was like the driver just vanished. I quickly stepped back down onto the road and looked in all directions. The sound of the grass swaying in the wind suddenly became extremely eerie. My heart was pounding, and I made the decision to not risk staying past my welcome. I hurried back to my truck and drove off. Notifying the police, as I did, they found the truck still there, parked in the middle of the road, and still no sign of the driver anywhere. After investigating, they figured out who was driving it and reported him as missing. They also found evidence of 3 other vehicles having been parked in the grass, right by the spot the semi I was at, though obviously I never saw them, and there was no way to know exactly why they were there. The search was pretty extensive for the missing driver, but they never found even a clue as to where he is, so it's very unlikely he'll ever be seen again. But whatever happened to that other trucker very well could have been me. Had I been the first to arrive at that area since then? I've been hyper-aware of any sketchy situations and hope to never be involved in something like that again. I was en route for an overnight delivery, where I was driving. It was mostly empty roads. The only other people that were on the roads at this time of night were other delivery drivers. The night was going well, though nothing interesting for the first several hours around 2 a.m. I stopped at a truck station to fill up and use the restroom, as the next little bit was going to be a long stretch through dense forest roads with very few places to stop at, if any. As I was driving along in just about an hour or so after my last stop, I randomly saw something ahead. I only had a few seconds to get a good look before passing by, but there was a person standing on the side of the road again. If I wasn't already clear, there was absolutely nothing but dense, unpopulated forest, with no other roads or anything. So seeing a person standing out here without a car anywhere in sight was really strange. In the few seconds I looked at them, though, they never waved at me or yelled for help, or tried to get my attention. In any way, I couldn't stop thinking about it, as I drove for another mile, before I suddenly saw another person standing on the side of the road. There was a woman this time. She was wearing ripped-to jeans and a red sweatshirt, and as I passed by, we made eye contact, and she just stared at me. No smile, no frown, just an empty face. It was extremely disturbing enough to make me literally shiver. I looked in the mirror after passing them and could see their head follow my truck before they were covered up by the dark when I looked back at the road. Though my heart almost stopped and I slammed on the brakes, I could feel the whole weight of the semi pushing forward as I abruptly came to a stop right in the center of the road. There was a body. It was laying flat across the street, though I couldn't tell if they were alive or not. They weren't moving, but I also didn't see any signs of an accident. Like there was nothing else on the road. And the way that they were positioned, it didn't look like a car had hit them or anything like that. I felt like I needed to check if they were okay, but also I had this really bad feeling about whatever this was. I mean, seeing 3 people out here in just the span of a mile is a crazy coincidence. I looked around at the forest, covering either side of me, and this sense I had only continued to grow, after being stopped for a whole minute. I put it back in drive, and carefully drove around the body. My heart was still racing, and when I finally got around them and started back on the road, I checked my mirrors. One last time. The body wasn't on the ground anymore. They were standing up and watching me drive away. My eyes were peeled for the rest of that drive. As I was genuinely terrified, I didn't see any more people along the road, though I think that it was a setup of some kind. They were probably trying to get me to stop and check on them. But clearly, they weren't dead or injured. So what they would have done, I really don't know. Seeing those other people before, though there's no saying how many others could have been around, or even literally sitting in the forest right next to me, just waiting for me to get out of my truck. Even just rethinking about that night still creeps me out. I was driving from Omaha, Nebraska to Fargo, North Dakota. It's actually a regular route for me that I do a couple times a month. Personally, I love it. The whole drive is through flat farmland. That's super easy to drive through, and there's barely any traffic to deal with doing the route. So often, I always took the same stops. The halfway point that I'd always stop to sleep at was a truck stop that sat in between 2 really small towns in South Dakota. This truck stop was abnormally large, and since there were very few truckers taking this route, it was almost always empty. Maybe 2 or 3 other trucks. And that's it. Anyway, the first day of driving went well, and I'd arrived at this truck stop just after 1 a.m. But something was immediately wrong. The building that was there was completely boarded up, and all the gas pumps looked like they were ripped out of the ground, and all the lights that should have been lighting up the lot were off. It had been shut down, and abandoned. I couldn't say I was surprised, but this really threw off my routine. And now I either had to drive for another hour or try sleeping at this dark, abandoned lot. Now, on any other day, I probably would have just said, "Screw it," and slept there. But for some reason, this night, I didn't even consider it. I immediately pulled back onto the highway and continued driving, only to quickly regret my decision. As I struggled to keep my eyes open, I made it a very unimpressive 15 more minutes before pulling onto the gravel on the side of the road and trying to slap myself back awake while I was there. I looked out the windows. I was in the middle of nowhere, and honestly, I knew this was a bad idea, but I figured there was no point in dangerously driving while sleepy and tired when I could just sleep here. I know other truckers did it all the time, so I felt comfortable enough to try it. I shut off the engine and locked the doors, then put my window covers up and leaned the seat back. Maybe I underestimated how comfortable I was, because my body just wouldn't allow me to fall asleep. I laid there for probably 20 minutes, just waiting to drift off. And that's when I heard something. It was a small squeak, like from an old car braking somewhere behind my trailer. I leaned forward and turned my head to listen. Very faintly, there was the sound of a car's engine humming. I was really confused, but hoped that it was just a police car checking up on me. I took down the window shade and looked at the side mirror. I couldn't tell exactly what kind of car it was, but it definitely wasn't a cop car. I only had a few seconds to think through things before I heard someone call out. They just said, "Hey." But it terrified me, thinking I had to leave. I turned the truck on. These things aren't exactly fast to start up, and as soon as they heard the engine start going, I could hear their footsteps start sprinting. They got right up to the passenger door and started aggressively pulling on the handle. Just as I started moving, they jumped up and held onto the door as they stared at me through the window. This guy looked like he was early 40s, with a long, bushy white and brown beard, and had a dark hoodie over his head. He banged on the window as I continued to pull on the highway, and right when I started to gain some speed, he shattered the window. My eyes shot over at the broken glass. But outside the door, the man was gone in the mirror. I saw him rolling on the road, either from jumping off or losing his grip. I continued picking up my speed until I could no longer see him or his car. Thankfully, he didn't seem to try to chase me. I called the cops, but they were so far away that by the time they got there, it had already been 35 minutes, and the only thing left at the scene were the shard of glass. On the road, had that guy been a few seconds earlier to breaking the window, he probably would have had enough time to reach in and open the door, and I can only imagine what would have happened next. Here's a lesson to everyone to leave as soon as you feel something is wrong, because every second could be the difference between getting away or never getting away